exposing you to superior rap maneuvers. Ill freight spewer. Tongue swifters and moving as cheaters and cougars communicating creative juices from mama doula straight like the list of measuring tapes of rulers.
Hello.
Hey, Mama.
Hi. I have to apologize.
Oh, it's okay. It's all right. I came outside and I'm sitting out here with the dragonflies and all the bugs and whatnot. It's this blue one that flew over here and it's been like watching me since I came outside.
I love it.
Beautiful.
Oh,
I know. I'm at my mom's house and every time I come out here, I started they live in the country and my grandfather used to live on this land. It's generational land that's been passed down since my great-great-great-grandfather.
wow.
And it's every time I come out here, there's a lot of dragonflies that just they swarm to me. And it was never scary. It never was scary for me. So I don't know what it is. They like me. And they come around. The one today is blue.
They recognize your DNA signature. That's very common for people who stay on the same land, same geographical ley lines as their ancestors. The birds, the insects, they all recognize. We've been fogged from remembering. We don't necessarily have that same intel because, the foods we're eating, this indoctrination, but they remember who you are, and it's passed down through their DNA, so they know who you are more than you know who you are. Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful.
Wow. That's heavy. You already opened up the conversation. For everybody who's unfamiliar or new to you and who you are and what you teach, introduce yourself. Who is Fleurbrun? What does the brown flower stand for? What is that all about? And I know you don't consider yourself a teacher. I watched a lot of your videos and you say that you're one of us. You just, you're one of us, but, I do have a lot of respect and reverence for those who come with knowledge and, information that we can use to kind of go from one state of being to another. So really just tell people who you are and what you're about and how you get your revelations.
Okay, well, I'm Fleurbrun. I have different names, and I don't necessarily have one base characteristic. Fleurbrun was a name as a child. I come from a Creole background. My family is from Martinique, St. Lucia, and some from Panama, Central America, and also the southern part of the French Antilles in the Caribbean. And as a young girl, I was having apparitions from the first, before I could remember. My mother could remember me doing odd things, seeing things in a room. I didn't sleep with my eyes closed until maybe I was 5 or 6. I used to sleep with my eyes open, looking around the room in the field. And, hindsight is 20/20, I didn't know what that was, or even when my mother used to tell me that I did that. But now as an adult, I realized that I was piercing through the dimensions, seeing through them even at that young age. I'm a contactee or an experiencer, which some may say. I've had contact with different beings, interterrestrials, extraterrestrials, and interdimensional from my youth. As I became a young lady and a little older, more, gaining more reverence, I realized that the beings that were in contact with me eventually revealed themselves to me as the Andromedans, though I was having contact with the sect of Insectilians, which are now I know to be beings that were working alongside a group of melanin-dominant females that were originally from the Mother Tiamat, which is our planet, but they were the Mayan, part of the Mayan Empire. And during the time of our last shift, one of our previous shifts, I won't say the last shift, these wonderful melanin-dominant beings that are, normally when people have contact with them, they know they have dreadlocks, beautiful dreadlocks, or coils, tight coils with, gold. Usually sometimes they'll have gold pieces on each one of the coils or individually spaced between the two. Sometimes they use a tribal marking on their face, which, I know I'm going all over the place, which I remember seeing sometimes in the mirror. I'll see the markings on my face still from my past life with these sea stars. That when they did their exodus, the minds didn't leave. They did the exodus into the inner earth, and they ended up going through a portal that took them to the Andromedan star system, where they befriended a group of insectilians that they've been working alongside of for eons. And those sea stars have made their way back and are really influencing our environment right now. That's why you're seeing the awakening, because of the melanin dominant female now. She is being invoked by her sea stars that have returned during a time when divine feminine consciousness is coming back into her home court advantage. I like to utilize it like that, the term like that. And because of that, along with the Naga serpent line, which is the Anunnaki bloodline of Enki, the females of that sect also have come back to work alongside with the Andromedans to help bring that field back into what we consider to be the first cycle, which is the cycle of the Nubia. So we're going back into our first cycle, where the melanin dominant women actually existed and dominated this planet. They were the originators of this planet at the time where the first cycle, where we go back to the first cycle, existed. That being said, I know that was a lot.
Oh, that was a lot, but it wasn't foreign. It didn't feel foreign. It didn't feel like what the hell is she talking about? It actually it goes right into what I was just saying as far as these particular insects go, the insectilians, the whole concept of these ancient, very ancient beings, these, insects or beings downloading information to us. And I remember listening to something you were talking about our blood types and how some of us are those mothers returned, and some of us are, those I don't know if you use the word reincarnations, but just those spirits that have come back and manifested in various bodies, and we all have assignments. We're all here to do our part. We all have a part to play in this shift that's taking place.
Absolutely. And yes.
Now, I couldn't tell you. Now, what did you say the original blood type was?
The original, now, there's discrepancy here. Okay, so the original, remember, there were beings. Now, we can go back to where Mother Tiamat was intercepted. The planet, what we consider to be the planet we're existing on, is a being. It is a living, breathing, porous, conscious being, if you can conceive that or perceive that. When she had visitors, we can't go back to as far as, she's always been visited by different beings from different star systems, but when she has always had beings living within her in the inner earth worlds that do exist. But when she had her first visitors, the Anunnaki are the ones that most of us have a genetic recollection of, based on the fact that they were the ones who really did a lot of the scientific genetic grafting of the first, what we consider to be human being on Earth. There were beings here existing which were androgynous, what we consider to be female beings that were already here on the Earth surface and inner Earth. But when the Anunnaki came, and there were others that came, I don't want to give them all the credit, but it's the ones that most of us are related to genetically. When they came and grafted us, because most of us can go back to Kemet, we have a remembrance of Kemetic history, also of Sumerian history. Many of us have a genetic memory of that. That's why we're so fast, people of color are so fascinated by Egypt, or, quote unquote Egypt. It's not Egypt, it's Kemet, land of the black, because Kemet means black. And I don't like to use the word black, it's just melanin dominant environment. So the Anunnaki came when they did their grafting, genetic grafting. They did create beings that were utilized for mining, which weren't us. And I want to make sure I detail that, because there's been a misnomer or misconception that the beings that were created to mine and slave for gold were people of like us, what we consider to be melanin dominant people of today. That's untrue. They created beings that were, I think they're called the Analu, Nanalu, Mr. Corey, a friend of mine knows the actual name of them. They were more beast-like, just more programmable. They looked nothing like us, and they were just meant to mine gold and utilize for that aspect of what the Anunnaki needed, which was gold, to be able to preserve their own homeworld planet, which you consider to be Nibiru, to fix their atmosphere that they had. They needed the gold to utilize for that as a tool. But why I get into that, why that's connected to the bloodlines, is because when they were here for a period of time, they decided to create beings with their own genetics, the Anunnaki. And when they did that, that's when we are conceived, so to speak, humanity as we know it today, as far as the melanin-dominant population. When they did that, because we are mixed, it's just like a parent who's created children, and there's a love for us. That's why Kemet was so popular. That's why there were pyramids erected, because those were their children, their offspring. You know, they were seeded from the Anunnaki, and that's why they were also gifted with information, some information, and obviously the gift of the gods, telepathy, telekinesis, some of the abilities that these beings had from coming from other worlds. We were gifted just because we were part of their genome. And when you have that, then you get the O positive. O positive, which now I had to switch this up because for a while I had to, I worked in the world of genetics and heredity. I studied that as in my, I say previous life. When I was in my youth, I did go into genetics and heredity, and I worked in a laboratory. And what I noticed were some idiosyncrasies going on with different blood types that I just noticed working in a lab, looking at genomes. But as I'm in the ET community and the UFO community, I put certain things together, and also with my intel from our other contactees, melanin dominant especially, we found out that O positive is the linkage to the Anunnaki bloodline. O negative is also another off-world blood type, but it can be linked to either being genetically modified, or it can be linked to being connected to the Draconians, which is a different type of sect of reptilians, or even it can be connected to certain bloodlines of the insectilians. So the O negative has a couple linkages, but the O positives, any of the positives, any of the roots of the positive, positives are a direct connected lineage, genome-wise, to the Anunnaki.
Okay. I see.
Thank you for listening to the Nine Minds Radio Show. We're going to cut to a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with our episode. Now, I know Urban Essentials has everything the skin needs. Let's talk about it.
Absolutely. We carry organic and natural handcrafted bath bombs, body butter, soap, and infused oils. We also carry handmade earrings and Zodiac cuffs. You can find Urban Essentials at urbanessentials.us on Facebook, urban_essentials.us on Instagram, and Urban, this one is spelled URBN_essentials on Twitter.
All right, thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate the opportunity.
Got you. I was wondering because, especially that aspect of it, knowing that the different bloodlines are connected to different groups of beings as well. I remember back in 2012 when I first started kind of learning about these interdimensional and otherworld beings being a part of the population on Earth, that a lot of them, not only have they been here for a long time, but there are others who are actually like pulling the strings or manipulating humans to do what it is that they need done on the planet, on Mother Earth, the Terra, Tiamat. What can you tell me? Because when I started learning about this, the group called the Pleiadians, they were revered by a lot of different groups of people. They were held in this very high regard And as I was learning, I didn't take on any opinion or any, I had no emotional connection to any group that I was learning about, but I learned that the Pleiadians at the time what was being taught is that they were this benevolent group of people who, came to Earth to serve humans, to teach humans, to teach them to be more benevolent. And when I watch, I listen to you and others speak now, I hear that they are actually the perpetuators of this system that's really like harming the planet and hurting people. Can you kind of elucidate on that? Just shed some light on what that is.
Okay, and my opinion has changed since I think I made a video in 2000, maybe 12, 13, about the Pleiadians and not even really resonating with their frequency based on the intel that I was getting more so by the Lunars. Lunars I consider to be more European sets that were perpetuating these beings to be benevolent, being beautiful, being, servants to mankind.
Right.
At the time, it didn't sit well with me, the imagery, the blonde hair, blue eyes, these beings that were coming. And only it seemed that Europeans were having these experiences with them. There was a sect of melanin-dominant people who said they were having some contact, but it was nothing really substantial. So as time went on, I used to discount them in my videos. I didn't have many nice things to say. I didn't personally believe it just because I'm a contactee. And not to say being a contactee, you know all beings, but you know what resonates with you and you know what doesn't. So fast forward to 2016, especially me, myself, and Barry Littleton became friends. He's also a contactee, a melanin dominant one, who was having a level of contact with beings he had in his youth. We kind of came together, and he actually went to a conference. I forgot. It was at the Semeti. I forgot. Semeti, they have like a big UFO conference at, I forgot where it is, up in, I think it's Oregon. He met Peter Slattery, who was friends with Peter Slattery from Australia, and he was friends with many of the indigenous aborigines from there. Then we found out, and I get chills every time, and it made me sad, but it made me happy because I understood why that the Pleiadians in the concept that it was being perpetuated to us en masse was untrue just based on the visual. That's why it didn't resonate with many of us, because it didn't make sense. How could these Pleiadians be here? And many indigenous, remember, people all over the planet at one point before genetic modification happened were all brown. It didn't matter if the whole region, and most of the planet was tropical at the time. That's before the planet broke apart, the land masses broke apart. So come to find out from the Aboriginals, and this is documented. They actually have documents, and they actually have their historical account for the fact that the Pleiadians, which also the Cherokee, because we linked it to the Cherokee, the Pleiadians, in fact, they look like the indigenous Cherokee tribes, which are also cousins to the Blackfoot in the states, in part of the states and more so in the northern part of the Americas, and the Aboriginals that are also located in Australia and also in New Zealand. They are the ones seeded directly from the bloodline of the Pleiadians, and the Pleiadians look like them. Now let's look at the Aboriginals. I look very reminiscent of the Aboriginals. The wider, pudgy nose, the hair that's somewhat coiled, but maybe lays a little flatter lines. Those are the Pleiadians. Same with the Cherokee. The different type of features of the Cherokee, very dark, melanin, beautiful skin, copper to brown, deep brown skin. That is what the Pleiadians actually look like, and that's who they seeded here, were those indigenous groups, including some of the places in Central America that were also seeded by the Pleiadians, the indigenous groups. So let's fast forward. Now we're finding out from the Aboriginals, who actually have proof. Many of the European sects do not have proof. They've just made this up. A lot of the intel that you're getting from a lot of these sects, they're saying they're channeling these beings, the Pleiadians, and they look this way. They have no formulated intel as far as anything that's been documented. That's why I had a problem with the Pleiadians, because I didn't see on any pyramid, I didn't see on any I didn't see any hieroglyphics. I didn't see any erected stone figures that were reminiscent of these supposed Pleiadians that were European looking, because it didn't exist.
Right.
They didn't look like that. They looked
Right.
like the originals. And that's why now it makes sense when you're seeing all these erected heads of what you consider to be Olmec heads and Negroid. I like to say Negroid because they want to claim that, a lot of people want to claim that things are European rather than brown people, indigenous people. Now you can understand why we're seeing all over the Americas, Central America, South America, and Australia, and New Zealand, you're seeing erected stone figures, some that have been aged, obviously after time being, affected by the elements, the natural elements, that they look like those people. And that is
right. Looks like my uncles, my cousins.
Exactly. There you go. So, yes, the Pleiadians do exist, and I acknowledge them now. And they are positive, but they're not here in the droves. They have left. They're not necessarily they didn't really have much control or power here. They did have contact with their own genetic groups, and I don't say that they didn't have contact with others, because remember, even with the Lunars or the Europeans, they were grafted from melanin dominant people, and mostly from those particular genetic lines with the melanin dominant that had more of the straighter hair, the more sit down, more coiled, but it was straighter and so on. They were grafted from those, even the Indians. So that's why there may be a connection that they have with them genetically. So I don't want to discount that they had that, but the visual is absolutely false. That is something that they've whitewashed, just like the Sphinx cutting off the nose, just like a lot of the historical data that we've gotten from many of the different groups. They make them look more European, to more, and everybody does that to a certain degree, to make them more reminiscent of themselves. But they are very much indigenous. They look like the average Cherokee, Blackfoot, and also Iroquois, also the Aboriginal in New Zealand and Australia.
Well, I have another question, because when I talk about this type of stuff with people who are really not open to it, they might be history buffs, they're looking for what they would refer to as practical information, and they may say something like, well, when ancient African explorers traveled from the west coast of Africa to South America and North America along the coast and populated with the indigenous tribes of those lands who had, were already there, they were looked at oftentimes as gods. They were looked at as, something very strange, something different, and something from a whole nother world, because they arrived on these grand ships. When you think about people like Ramses II and III, where they found tobacco in Ramses II's stomach, or Ramses III setting up what they call the mound builders in Louisiana, Georgia, Mississippi, Florida, or these melanated people who look different but look the same, who came from the West Coast and North Africa down into these lands. And they might say, well, I don't know if I want to call them, the Pleiadians or the Insectilians or even the Saturnians. What if they were just a whole other group of people from another part of the planet that, it doesn't really go back that far, or it does go back that far, but they transformed and changed over time? Like, how do you reconcile, or not even reconcile, but bring together the narratives of things that you can take account for through historical reference and things that you have channeled or that have come to you from the other side? Because that's it's a push and pull of my own as well, because I hear these things and I'm aware of these things from the spirit world or from the other side, from a whole other dimension, but I have to find, I guess, a practical way to apply it to make it make sense in my head. So how do you, you know what I mean?
Yes, logical approach. What a lot of things get lost in translation, just like my first language was French. So sometimes when I'm even translating certain terms, there's no terms that are translatable based on the fact that the language is not the same, and the way that things are elated are going to be untranscribable. And it's the same with our concept of beings and people. We all have these different beings. What I can also state is that the Moors, which not the Moors of today that call themselves Moors, who claim that, their sovereignty is Moor, and, they consider themselves to be genetically, from the Moorish line. I would say that, remember, as we know as a fact, that if we go into practical science, we know that geographically the Earth was at one point all one. The Earth, it wasn't broken apart, and it wasn't a continent away. Like Africa wasn't as separated from Europe as it is today via waterways, because that didn't exist at the time. Also, the fact of the matter is, yes, there were brown people all over the planet, and how do we state which brown people we were? We do know that the Moors, which I note to be the Centaurians, are different beings that were here who had a whole other agenda, and really the ones utilizing that. And let me state this first: I don't channel. I don't agree with channeling for the reason that when people channel, you don't know who's on the other side. If I can't see it, taste it, touch it, I can't confirm who is talking to me, and I don't like leaving myself open or receptive to beings taking over my body or giving me intel that I can't confirm.
Right.
Anything that I've seen is face to face. It's literally as real as me talking to you now. And I wouldn't come out stating it if it wasn't that. It's just the type of person I am. I need facts. I'm a Sagittarius, too. I like to understand everything, and I like to intuitively transcribe it in my head, and it's translatable in a logical way and also in a metaphysical way. So any being that I've encountered, it's not something I've channeled. I don't agree with channeling at all. I don't believe in letting yourself being receptive to other beings, especially those you don't know who they are. Because many of the other beings on the other side could be incarnate, archonic. You don't know. And they could tell you they're God, and many times they do. And people believe them. So, I don't leave myself receptive to that. Any contact that I've had has been physical. A lot of it has been face-to-face. A lot of my intel comes from also talking and conversing with other contactees and experiencers. So, and also my age, meaning that I've been on the planet for a long time, a part of this community, the ET community, which was not melanin dominant. It was mostly European.
Right.
Took over. That I was.
You have a few and a lot of the elders who are contactees, like Delbert Blair, melanated people, who have been like a part of that community for a while, but kind of underground, they lecture for small groups. They haven't been popular.
It's because they're not invited. That's not purposefully done, because even as what people consider me to be popular, and I'm universally friendly, meaning that I'm accepted, especially in the European sect, because I get a lot of people who ask to talk to me in Europe and also in a lot of different, a cultural and racial sects. We don't get invitations like that because there are people, racism, which is a false concept, it's a false construct. It's created to cause, cause adversity, cause separation. It is very prevalent in the UFO and ET community, and it's shockingly prevalent, more so than people would even think. It's why we don't get invitations to the main UFO conferences, even Barry, myself, a couple other people, we don't get invited to those conferences, and nor did Delbert Blair, because people who are European, and I won't say all, because obviously I have a big following of many different people, and it's vast. They fear the intel that we're sharing because it does not fit into their constructs that they've created. A lot of it is false. It's not true. Some of this stuff is man-made, created to just, give disinformation. They are frightened for this information to come out, that the majority of ETs coming here are melanin dominant. And they are holding more power than any other being. We just see it differently here, as above, so below. Sometimes the things that the ETs are doing to some of the Europeans is using them for lab rats. It translates in their consciousness, and they take it out on people of color here. That's what you're seeing.
That makes total sense to me. I remember one day I was either meditating or laying down in between being awake and falling asleep. and I saw it was a room, and there were these metal tables, like steel tables, lined up in rows, and on these tables were bodies, and they were all European bodies, and there were these like little, not little, but like gray extraterrestrial or non-human looking or humanoid looking beings, and they were reaching inside the genitals and anuses and like, you know what I mean, examining these bodies.
Their creations. Their creations. Yes.
Yeah, they weren't dead. They were alive. And they were, you know, doing things to them. And I jumped up, and my husband, he was like, "What's the matter with you?" And I was like, "I just saw some crazy shit. I don't know what that was." And I, you know, I kept it to myself. I didn't really go too deep, but I knew that it was I was looking into something that I hadn't really asked to see. But for whatever reason, I saw it anyway.
Yes.
And
it's correct.
So
it's correct.
Yeah, but and then
what you saw is they're genetically modified. They were created after the fact as to be very open to mind control. Just like I say, with people of color, they control us from the outside. For Europeans, they control them from the DNA. They grafted these people to be accessible and, you know, controllable through mind control. So they control them through their genetics, and they control us with our environment.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay, so that's why. And even if those environments never really existed, like how and I was just having this conversation with my dad earlier, how they explain these conditions of enslavement and how they were extremely harsh and how Europeans dominated over us, and we, you know, basically had no control over our circumstances, and I have a very rough time believing that it happened the way they tell us it happened, especially knowing about, like, hearing about the constant rebellion and uprisings and people just, like, in groups were getting up and walking off the plantation into the mountains or, you know, further south or, you know, whatever the case may be, that when they depict our stories from their perspectives, they always put themselves as the dominant group, the group that was able to overpower someone stronger and more, you know, more, I guess, well, I mean, if let's just stick with the physical, because people get offended when you say we're smarter or more intelligent, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really care about offending anybody, but still, just to stick with.
We're just being mindful of other people's perception.
Right. Yes. Like, I just don't believe that there's no way that they could have just dominated us in that way. And I think the narrative went a lot differently than how they explain it. And so that's why I'm more open to these narratives and these ideas that there's way more to the human history story than what we even could fathom, than what we can understand just by reading history books. So
absolutely. And remember who's writing the history, you know, who's giving the narrative. And yes, it's going to always come from their perspective, or it's going to be more looking in a way that's more advantageous to them culturally, nationality-wise, religious-wise, whatever it is. Just so happens that, you know, we've lived under a more dominant European system. But, if you believe in different dimensions and different timelines, it depends on where you came from, because I don't want to use the word believe. I know that there are people who never came from slavery. There was no such thing.
Right.
But the narrative is of that, to keep them in that perpetual mode, even though that's not something that was in their timeline. So we don't even know that existed. It's just been perpetuated to us through historical chronicles and, you know, literature and, you know, through, you know, the intel of those who are dominating the educational system. I know that I came from a different timeline where that did not exist.
Right. Right. So those traumas and those issues that they say, we have, it's almost like a spell was spoken over us, and we adopted it as our own story.
Exactly.
Like they spoke the story to us, and then we adopted the trauma and the pain. And it's as simple as saying you're a trauma-based people by giving us the trauma in stories, and then we adopt it as our own. And there's, it becomes difficult for us to break free from that story, from that spell. And I know.
Let's be said, not everyone has adopted that. Some people have adopted it, and when you adopt it, then you start feeling the symptoms of it. If you've not even accepted that, then you don't even feel anything about it. I feel zero connection to it, but I have empathy for the concept of it and where that comes from. And it doesn't make me feel like I'm above and beyond. It just means that that doesn't resonate in my DNA. It doesn't feel like it was a part of my genetic coding previously.
Right.
Sorry.
I know that,
Hello?
and I feel
okay,
similarly. Oh, no, you're fine. I'm sorry. Were you finished? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, I'm fine. No, I'm done.
Okay. Well, I know I feel similarly, and I think, and I was talking, I know I always say, I was talking about this with somebody because I'm always having conversations about these concepts, but there was I grew up a certain kind of way, right? I always say, some people would say, oh, you grew up spoiled, but I would call it protected. A lot of those of us who grew up protected, where our parents didn't leave us just anywhere. We haven't been subject to or exposed to molestation, rape, that sort of, like the issues that a lot of black women period, have to deal with. It's a lot easier. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know your story at all. But a lot of us who haven't been through those types of traumas, those really like what the coming of age is for a lot of us, a lot of melanated women. Our coming of age stories include our cousins or uncles molesting or raping us at young ages. Our fathers leaving us. Like, these are things that are the reality for a lot of people. And somebody like me who would say, we have the power as women, my audience, I speak specifically by desire to melanated women, right? Okay. So if I say as black women, as melanated women, we have the power to decide, create, manifest our realities the way we want them. We have been victims all this time, and now we can be co-creators with source energy, okay? We directly benefit from source energy if we just get up and use it, if we get up and activate it. And I've been accused of victim blaming. I've been accused of, blaming it all on the women or putting it all on the women. But the reason why I put it all on the woman is because we have all of the power and ability to change the reality. And my favorite part about what you do, when I listen to your videos, when you start talking about the divine feminine, divine sisterhood, what does it look like? Like a divine feminine sisterhood matriarchal system. How does it benefit men and women, not just the women, but how do men benefit from relinquishing that patriarchy, that patriarchal mindset? Is patriarchy the umbrella for the racism, sexism, violence, all the things that we see, and how do we shift, how do we stand up and start to shift it over from one system, not necessarily to another system, but a relinquishing of a need for systems and just be.
It is divine feminine is where everything comes from the feminine. We are the archetype female is where males come from. So men benefit from the fact that we are the heirloom, that we are the mother hub. We are the source of their being. So when we're healthy, it transmits to all aspects of what comes from us, every race, every genetic code, every gender, all benefits from our healthiness. When divine feminine comes up to sweep and clear and cleanse, it will perpetuate through all of the gene pools, all of the nationalities. Everything will be healed, and manifestation of what we are experiencing will all be a lot healthier in the field. So, I don't speak as men as separate, but the womb man is where man comes from. So it just makes sense that if the mother's healthy, all the children from her are healthy. That's why when you take a plane ride, what do they tell you? They tell you if there's anything about to pop off on the plane, they say, mother, you put on the mask first. Why? It's because if she's not well or healthy or able to, move about or be able to be alive, nothing that is connected to her will succeed. That's all it is.
Right.
And why we're seeing the sickness systemic in our environment is basically because the mother's sick. She's sick. She's overwhelmed. She's burdened. She's not aware of her power. She's unaware of her strength, where she comes from. She's unaware of everything. But now, because the awareness and the divine feminine conscious waves are coming in, if you notice, it is sweeping and cleansing, and it is not just to women of color, but it is to all aspects of the feminine. So you're seeing it stimulated. Even when Donald Trump won the Women's March, even though people had issues with it, that was that wave coming in strong. And
right.
Unity, and because a male that was considered to be so, quote unquote, a great poster child of the patriarch, a vampiric patriarch, it stimulated a wave of feminine unity. And that's why you saw all these women coming out. You saw the speeches. It was beautiful. And I don't care why it was stimulated. It was a denotion that is really what's occurring. We're actually having a clearing and cleansing. And you can see it everywhere. Even when I go to Whole Foods, where I used to see maybe one person of color, I'd be the speckle of brown in a sea of salt. You see the mothers in there with their children, with their afros, with their coils to the sky, proud, beautiful aunts on their ears. It is the most, I get chills just seeing that, feeling that. How many women of color now we're having conversations? We used to be sometimes so competitive or so hurt and so, so self-critical that we didn't even have a proper space to really bond with each other. How are we seeing that changing? Like almost overnight. I know it's not overnight, but you feel it. Like me and you having this conversation is a denotion to that feminine conscious wheel, that wave coming in, allowing us to connect, two sisters from different worlds, different lives, connect, and feeling comfortable and confident to even have a conversation like this. It's beautiful. And it's necessary, and we heal all. When we're healthy, anything that comes from our genome is healthy.
Right. And that's so important to me, especially with you saying that we are the original mothers. It was a melanated woman who gave birth to all of this. And I know for me, there are a lot of sisters in my boat, who, like me, have just started to trust and believe in our own magic, which magic to me is just the ability to manifest circumstances that you desire in your own life at will, right? To me, that is the purpose of all your rituals, all your potions, all your concoctions, everything all the herbs you grow, everything put together is to help your intentions come through stronger. And how do you think more of us can come out of the mindset of powerlessness to believing in and cultivating our power and our ability to create a new reality here on Earth?
Letting go of victim mindset. He did, they did. That's all it is. Because once you let that go, then you take ownership of your life. If you hold on to he did this, they did that, and also the church doesn't help, because that's a form of mind control. Once we let go of those false concepts of victimization or of demonization of others and take ownership, then everything will be transformable.